Alright, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm just headed to the airport. Does anybody else think it's weird that every international job seems to start at 4 a.m. or in the middle of the night somehow? I mean, why don't they ever start at noon? It just never happens. Anyways, the mission for today is to get this giant pile of gear to Mexico. So wish me luck. I feel like when people talk about jobs like this, it always starts from the plane taking off, but there is so much to get done before you ever get to this point. So let's talk about that for a minute. Here are 5 things that you need to prep before a big international shoot. One thing that I hear all the time when I tell people that I film documentaries for a living is how lucky I am that I get to travel for work. And that's true. That's a main reason why I got into this industry in the first place, was to see things and do things that a lot of other people don't get to. It's a huge privilege and I'm grateful for it every day. But for every great day of international filming, there's a huge amount of work that goes on beforehand that they'll never hear about. Except that I'm about to talk about it now, so maybe they will hear about it? I don't know, whatever. One thing to mention is that I'm making this video for freelancers, which in my experience almost all documentary filmmakers are. But if you happen to have a full-time job, then you probably have a production manager or a line producer to take care of this stuff for you. But for the rest of us, there's a ton of work that needs to be done before any shoot. And you need to budget time, money, and energy to get them done, whether it's for your own project or someone else's. I'm actually headed to Mexico myself next week to finish a really cool action-adventure sports documentary, so it seemed like a perfect time to talk about all the work that needs to be done while I'm actually going through the process of doing it myself. This shoot actually hasn't been too bad. It's been maybe even a little lighter than usual in terms of prep. But there is a serious amount of work you need to do before you ever start filming. So in this video I'm going to walk you through a few of the things you might not think about that need to get done before you can go out on a doc shoot. It's worth keeping these things in the back of your mind if you're going to be a documentary DP, because they will eat up a serious amount of time and money. I'll also try and estimate the amount of time and money that each thing cost me so you know what to expect for yourself. The first thing you have to do is negotiate. And by that I mean you actually have to come to an agreement with the production company so that the job is actually yours. Confirming the job might sound pretty simple, but in reality, it's a lot more complicated than most people think. Unless you're working for a friend, almost every new job starts with an email. The first thing they're going to want to know is, are you available on the dates that they're shooting, and what is your rate? If you're just starting out, my best advice is to do a little bit of market research and find out what other people at your skill level are charging. You definitely don't want to underprice yourself. I mean, I've done this a bunch of times where I've quoted a day rate that's on the lower side and they agree way too quickly and you realize that you're the lowest paid person on the crew and it's totally your fault. But at the same time, you don't want to ask for way too much money and set yourself at a price point that you're not really capable of delivering on. There are some really great DPs out there who charge $2,000 a day or more, and they're worth it. But if you're just starting out, trying to aim that high is likely not going to end well for you. There's definitely a sweet spot there, and if you can find it, my suggestion would be to start on the higher side and then negotiate down. It's always fine if they say no and then they haggle you down a little bit, but if you ask for a price and they agree to it, you're not going to be able to increase it later. If you're lucky, this will be locked in really quickly. But most of the time, there's a lot of back and forth with the production manager. And during this time, there's still no guarantee that the job is actually going to happen. I've had many projects fall apart after months of exchanging emails due to scheduling conflicts or budgetary problems or any number of things. So now I try not to get too excited about a job until I have a contract or a plane ticket in my hand. I've been talking about this current job for over a year, and up until a couple of weeks ago, I still wasn't positive that it was really going to happen. And throughout this whole process, you're going to have to send emails, have long phone calls, and do a bunch of Zoom meetings, even if the job isn't confirmed. Yo, how's it going?
And then from there, even if it is all clear, you can get in the country either by having a negative COVID test or being vaccinated. To get production insurance, you have to be running COVID protocols on a daily basis. So on top of having a complex, schedule with multiple locations and characters that you have to film on a big crew, you also have to add into that daily calendar when everyone's going to get a rapid test in the morning, wait for those results, then move in. If you've got sidekicks that are joining your host, you have to make sure that your local fixer is doing those rapid tests. Then you have to do them again at night. And it's the only way really to to, maintain and execute production.
Side note here, do yourself a favor and try and put a little bit of effort into learning how to write clearly. First impressions matter a lot, and as a freelance filmmaker, you are running a business. In the internet age, so much communication is done through writing that if you can't write well, it's kind of the same as showing up to a job interview in really dirty clothes. A really bad email response is a terrible first impression, and you'll never have a chance to go back and make another one. It's really hard to calculate exactly how much time I spend on negotiations and planning ahead of the shoot, but I'm gonna guess I had at least 10 phone calls that were an average of 45 minutes long for this, so there's 450 minutes right there. On top of that, I've had to write at least 50 emails, which takes, 2 to 3 minutes each, so there's another 100 minutes. Add that together and that's 550 minutes or almost 9 hours spent just on communications. The good news is it doesn't cost you anything, but 9 hours is more than a full day's work for most people and you're not going to get paid for that. So learn to write clearly and establish some basic negotiation skills and they will go a long way to making this process more efficient. The next thing that took a lot of my time to organize is this guy. This is a Carnet, which is a kind of international importation document that you need when you're traveling with a lot of gear. You know that little box on customs forms that asks if you're traveling with more than $10,000 worth of goods that you pretty much always tick no? Well, when you have 8 Pelican cases full of gear, you have to tick yes. That basically initiates a separate customs process where you go to a different line in a different part of the airport and you have to declare item by item what you're bringing with you. Basically, countries are worried that you're going to import goods and sell them at a cheaper price and not pay the taxes that they normally charge. Taxes on camera gear vary greatly from country to country. Like where I live in Canada, the taxes are way higher than in the US. So every country wants to be in control of things that are coming and going so that they can charge the taxes that they think are fair. And the way that they make sure that you're taking out what you bring with you is with a Carnet. To make a Carnet, the first thing you need to do is make an extremely detailed list, line by line, of everything you're bringing with you. That's every camera body, every lens, every major accessory, all your monitors and viewfinders and tripod heads, everything. You also need to include the country of origin, the exact price, and even the weight. Gathering all this information can take a long time, and if you hate Excel as much as I do, it can be a real hassle. Once your list is done, you send it off to whatever government authority is responsible for issuing carnets in your country. In Canada, it's the Chamber of Commerce. Then they'll charge you a fee based on the total value of your goods, and if you pay it, they'll send you back an official document that you can then show to customs at the airport. For me, each Carnet costs about $300, and then I have to purchase a separate insurance bond on top of that costs another $300. And then that only covers one single trip. Carnets work on pages, so every time you do a trip, you have to get a new page stamped, and once that page has been used, it's done. Your original Carnet only comes with one page, so if you plan on doing more than one trip with that gear, you need to pay up to $100 for each additional page. The good news is that production companies will usually pay you back for this, so it's not really lost money, but you will have to front it on your credit card until you get paid at the end of the job. The other problem with Carnets is that they're more or less final the moment you send them in. So if you get a bunch of new gear, you can't add it to your old Carnet. You have to start a new one and pay that additional price. For this trip, I have 2 Carnets, which is super annoying. One covers my main kit, my FS7 and my tripods and my lights and all my normal lenses, but I just got an FX3 and that has to be entered on its own Carnet along with the radios that I'm bringing, a bunch of extra batteries, and some other accessories that are going to be needed for the shoot. The first time you make a Carnet, it can be extremely time consuming. When I made my first Carnet, I had to go find every piece of gear I owned, take a photo of it, find its serial number, and then painstakingly enter it into a spreadsheet. It probably took me about 3 hours to make the Carnet, and then another, say, hour and a half to go online and fill out all the paperwork and pay all the fees to get the official document sent. So 4.5 hours total. If you're paying the cost yourself, it's probably at least $600 for the Carnet and the bond. If you're working for a production company, you'll get that money back. But if you're not, you'll have to eat that cost yourself. Whether or not you really need a Carnet depends on how much gear you're bringing and where you're going. It might sound really tempting to skip this process and save the money, but if you land in a country with 5 bags full of camera gear and a customs officer asks to look inside, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. In some cases, the fines that you'll get will be much higher than just paying the Carnet in the first place, and they actually have no obligation to let you in. They could just impound your gear until you decide to leave the country. I've had drones impounded in Kenya before, and I was once almost denied entry to New Zealand because the Carnet was filled out incorrectly. In the end, they let me through, but it was really tense. Whether or not you make a carnet for your own personal projects is your decision, but if you start working on big budget docs for networks, they're going to demand that you do it, so you might as well familiarize yourself with the process. When traveling internationally, it's just unavoidable that things are going to break. Your AC is going to leave a lens in the hotel room, or your subject's going to drop a lav in the toilet, or a dog's going to destroy your microphone because he likes the texture of your dead cat. Seriously, it's happened to me. Dogs love those wind covers. If it's your gear, you're not going to be very happy when it breaks, and you're going to need to replace it. There's two different kinds of insurance. There's production insurance that's usually provided on a case-by-case basis by the production company, and then there's your personal insurance. If you can, it's a good idea to have both types of insurance in place. Production insurance works just as though you were a rental company in any major city. If something breaks, the production company will make an insurance claim and you'll get paid back. That's really useful if one or two important items break and you need to get them repaired or replaced. Personal insurance is more to protect myself against losing everything in one catastrophic accident. Like for example, if your hotel room gets broken into or the van gets stolen while the whole crew's in the restaurant eating lunch, you could lose everything at once. That's why I have a personal insurance policy, so if that happens, I can afford to replace all my gear. If I didn't have that insurance, I would lose everything and it would take me years to be able to buy it all back. Pretty much my business would be ruined. My personal insurance is designed to have a very high premium, so I don't usually make claims on it unless something really serious has happened. It's really to protect me if I lose huge quantities of stuff all at once. Try to avoid claims on this at all costs, because every claim that you make will up your premiums, and in the long run it can add up to a ton of money. Getting camera insurance is pretty easy, but again, it takes a lot of time. Insurance companies want to see a very detailed list of everything that you have, including serial numbers, and usually they also want you to have photos of those items as sort of a second layer of proof that you really had them in the first place. So let's say it takes at least 3 hours. The cost of the insurance is variable depending on how much you're insuring. So my insurance prices change from year to year depending on what kind of gear I have. Right now it costs me about $300 a month. The good news is that your Carnet list and your insurance list can be the same thing. So once you've made a really good list, keep it updated and keep it safe because you're going to use it for both things. Next is the packing and gear organization. Now DPs are usually gearheads and I'm no exception. I actually really enjoy packing. I kind of see it as a problem-solving challenge where I'm trying to look ahead to what kind of issues we're going to run into on a shoot and then how I can solve those problems with gear. Like, are we going to need waterproof lights? Are we going to need extra grip equipment for mounting cameras to cars? Just trying to anticipate what kind of shots you're going to need and what sort of specialized tools you might need to get it done. For me, this part of the process is usually pretty fun, but there's also a lot of pressure attached to it, and it does take a huge amount of time. It might be fun to debate the merits of a 200 to 600 millimeter zoom lens compared to a 600 millimeter prime lens with your friends, but it's not fun anymore if you make the wrong decision and only realize until it's too late and you're already on the shoot. As a DP or cinematographer, you're in charge of keeping all of the visuals on that shoot running. If you forget that tiny proprietary cable and now none of the monitors work, the director isn't going to care that you had a lot of things to manage. All they're going to know is that you're not doing your job. Now, if you're just traveling with a mirrorless camera and one or two lenses to make, fun videos with your friends, that's totally different. But if you're packing for a major expedition shoot like I am right now, we're talking dozens of cases and bags to keep track of. When I was just a photojournalist, I used to be able to travel with carry-on luggage only, including my clothes. But these days I travel with somewhere between 5 to 9 pieces of checked baggage just on my own. I'm working on a separate packing video so you can see exactly what I bring on each of these trips, but for now let's just say that the packing is extremely time consuming and probably took me somewhere between 7 or 8 hours. I like to split it up over a couple of days where I pack everything and then I come back the next day and stare at it for a while to see if there's anything I forgot, and I kind of just add bits here and there until it's time to go. Packing time doesn't cost you anything, but is extremely time consuming. I will literally stand in front of piles of gear for hours at a time, just staring and trying to figure out if there's anything I could have possibly missed. I must look like a crazy person, but it's all part of the process for me. Either way, Don't think you can leave the packing until the night before, because if something important is missing, it's going to be your fault. The fifth obstacle that you have to overcome before you can start shooting is the airport itself. Honestly, I think airport stress is overlooked. When I travel for work, like I said, I travel with somewhere between 5 to 9 checked bags. I can't even fit that onto one of the standard airport trolleys. I have to bring my own folding cart just to be able to move through the airport. By the time I get to the baggage check desk, I'm usually pouring sweat just from pushing the thing around. When you have that much gear with you, and especially if you're by yourself, just getting from point A to point B can be a major ordeal. I mean, forget getting in the McDonald's line. You are attached to that gear. Like I mentioned, I started as a photographer and I used to travel extremely light. It was actually a point of pride to me that I could go upwards of 3 weeks on carry-on luggage only. I don't want to be bogged down with all this gear, but video is a gear-intensive process, especially if you want to do it at a really high level. So from what I can see, there's just no way around it. And it's not like you can just arrive at the airport and immediately check your bags and wash your hands of it. No, you have to put that Carnet document I was talking about to use. That means arriving at the airport early, going to the customs office, hoping you get an officer who's not too grumpy, and then getting them to sign off on all your equipment. If you're lucky, they'll just sign off quickly and they won't make you open up every case. But I've definitely had situations where a particularly zealous customs guy made me open every single Pelican case I had, and by the end we were going through and counting serial numbers on individual batteries and memory cards. So don't arrive at the airport last minute with that kind of gear. It could go very badly. I'm like that annoying person who always insists on showing up at the airport 3 hours early. Of course, it doesn't always work out that way, and sometimes I'm there last minute just like everybody else, but the less time you have, the more stressful it gets for you, and you really want to give yourself enough to do the process properly. So let's say another 2.5 to 3 hours just for getting through the airport. On top of that, there's also the cost of the bags. Baggage prices usually increase exponentially, meaning that the price between the first and second bag is not the same as the second and third, and it keeps going up the more and more bags you have, so that by the time you're checking 9, 10, 12 bags, the cost is ridiculously high. If you're working with a production company like I am, they'll pay you back, but you might have to front that cost yourself in the beginning, so make sure you have enough room on your credit card. And if it's your project and you have to pay for it yourself, remember that it could cost you thousands of extra dollars just in baggage alone. So those are 5 of the things that you have to do as a documentary filmmaker before you can get on the plane that most people don't think about. So I hope you can see now how traveling for fun and traveling for documentary shoots are way different. In the lead up to one of these big international trips, there is a ton of work to be done, and you most likely will not be getting paid for it. So if I add up all the time and money I spent prepping for this job, it's probably somewhere between 15 to 18 hours and around $2,000. In another month or so, I'll get most of that money back, but it's still sitting on my credit card right now. So if you were under the impression that being a documentary DP means just throwing a camera in a bag and hopping on a plane to one incredible destination after another, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. I'm definitely not saying it's not worth it, because it absolutely is. I love this job, and it's given me privileged access to things I never thought I'd be able to see, and for that, I'm extremely grateful. But traveling for fun and traveling to shoot an international documentary are very different experiences, and the more you know about it, the more prepared you can be. So I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you thought. And if you want me to make more specific, detailed videos on any of these topics, let me know down below. See ya. Long.